The morning arrived quietly, but it carried a feeling no one could explain, especially not Eleanor Brooks, who stood in her small Vermont kitchen holding a warm mug of coffee while the lake outside rested still and silver under the early light. Her life had settled into careful order after the divorce, a life where nothing surprised her anymore, where emotions were kept neat and controlled because hope, once taken too seriously, had left deep marks she did not wish to reopen. And yet that morning felt different in a way she could not name, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Eleanor moved through her routine quickly, not lingering on memories, putting on her coat and stepping outside where the chill met her face and reminded her she was alive, even when she tried not to think about it. And that was when she saw the moving truck parked across the street, large and unfamiliar, its engine silent but full of promise. And a man standing beside it with a box in his arms, tall, slightly unsure, looking around as if the town were a puzzle he was still learning how to solve. Daniel Carter had arrived before sunrise, driving through long, empty roads with nothing but old music and tired thoughts to keep him company, leaving behind Seattle and a life that had slowly broken him without ever being cruel enough to warn him it was ending. And now he stood there, box pressed against his chest, wondering if he had made a mistake by coming so far to start over, wondering if peace was something a person could truly find, or if it was just another idea people chased when everything else failed. When Eleanor's door closed softly behind her and their eyes met, neither of them smiled right away, not because they were unfriendly, but because something quiet and heavy passed between them, a recognition without reason, a pause that stretched longer than a normal stranger's glance. And then, Daniel smiled, a small, careful smile that did not ask for anything. And Eleanor felt her breath shift, as if her body remembered something her mind had forgotten. She nodded politely and walked toward her car, telling herself it was nothing, telling herself she was imagining things. But as she drove away, she glanced in her mirror and saw him still standing there, watching the road as if he had just seen a door open somewhere he did not know existed. Daniel set the box down slowly after she left, his heart beating faster than he expected, surprised by how one simple look could stir feelings he believed he had buried when his engagement ended months earlier without shouting or blame, just quiet disappointment and the slow realization that love alone could not fix two people growing in opposite directions. He had come to this town because it was small, because it did not demand anything from him, because he wanted a place where he could breathe again. But he had not planned for the woman across the street, the one with tired eyes and steady posture, the one who looked like someone who had learned how to survive without asking for help. Eleanor spent her workday distracted, her thoughts returning again and again to the man with the moving truck, annoyed with herself for caring, reminding herself that new people always brought change, and change often brought pain. Yet part of her wondered what had brought him here, what he had left behind, and why his quiet smile felt more honest than anything she had seen in years. By afternoon, the town had accepted Daniel in its usual gentle way, neighbors offering help, small talk, directions. And while he thanked them all, his attention kept drifting toward the house across the street, toward the closed door that somehow felt important, even though he did not know why. As the sun lowered and the lake reflected soft gold light, Eleanor returned home and noticed the truck was gone, replaced by neatly stacked boxes inside the house, proof that the stranger was no longer passing through but staying. And the thought settled deep in her chest, both warm and unsettling. That night, as Eleanor stood by her window, Watching the lights turn on across the street, she felt the weight of something beginning, something fragile and unknown. While Daniel sat alone on his floor, surrounded by boxes, realizing that starting over was never just about new places, but about new chances. And though neither of them spoke again that day, both lay awake longer than usual, hearts quietly aware that a simple morning glance had opened a story neither of them had planned for, a story already moving faster than they expected, and one that promised to be greater, mightier, and far beyond anything they ever imagined. Days passed quickly after that first meeting, and without planning it, Eleanor and Daniel began to fall into each other's orbit, starting with short greetings that turned into small talks by the mailbox, then longer conversations that made time slip away without warning. Eleanor noticed how Daniel listened closely, not interrupting, not trying to fix anything, just present, which made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in years. While Daniel noticed how Eleanor spoke carefully, but honestly, as if every word mattered, as if she had learned that careless words could leave lasting marks. They discovered shared habits, like early mornings and quiet evenings, and simple joys, like walking near the lake where the water reflected the sky, and the world felt slower and kinder. And with each step side by side, something unspoken grew between them, something built on comfort rather than excitement, which somehow felt deeper. Daniel told her about leaving Seattle, about a job that paid well but drained his spirit, about an engagement that ended not with anger, but with the slow understanding that love alone could not hold two people together when they no longer dreamed the same dreams. And Eleanor shared parts of her own past, how she once believed marriage meant safety, how she gave years of her life trying to be enough for someone who slowly stopped seeing her, and how she learned to live quietly afterward, believing peace was safer than hope. Their conversations were not dramatic, but they were honest, and honesty made them feel closer than grand words ever could. One evening, dark clouds rolled in suddenly, and rain fell hard, knocking out power across the street. And Eleanor stood in her dim house, feeling small and unsure, until a knock came at her door. And when she opened it, Daniel stood there holding a flashlight and 2 mugs of coffee, his hair damp from the rain, his expression gentle, offering help without expectation. And she let him in, surprised at how natural it felt. They sat together wrapped in blankets on the porch, listening to the rain hit the roof, talking about quiet fears they rarely shared with anyone. Daniel admitting how afraid he was to trust again, how starting over felt brave and terrifying at the same time, and Eleanor confessing that she had trained herself not to want too much, believing that wanting led to disappointment. And as they spoke, the rain softened, but the air between them grew heavier with emotion, not uncomfortable, just full. When the storm passed and the power returned, neither of them rushed to end the evening, and though there was no touch beyond shared space and no promises made, both felt something settle deep inside them, something steady and warm. After that night, their connection deepened naturally, through shared meals, quiet laughter, and moments of silence that felt meaningful rather than awkward. And Eleanor found herself looking forward to seeing Daniel in a way that scared her, while Daniel realized that his days felt empty when he did not hear her voice. Yet both carried old wounds that whispered warnings, reminding them of past pain, telling them to slow down, to protect themselves. And so they kept certain feelings unspoken, choosing patience over passion, though the unspoken truth pressed gently between them. Eleanor lay awake some nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was opening her heart too soon, afraid that hope might once again leave her alone. While Daniel walked long evening past by lake, thinking about how this small town and this quiet woman were becoming part of him in ways he had not expected. And both of them felt the same quiet question growing stronger with each passing day. A question neither dared to ask yet, because asking it might change everything. And so, part 2 of their story unfolded quickly, but carefully, filled with growing closeness, soft smiles, shared fears, and a connection built not on rush or desire, but on understanding, leaving both of them standing at the edge of something meaningful, aware that once hearts began to open, they cannot easily be closed again. As the days grew shorter and the air colder, the bond between Eleanor and Daniel felt stronger, but heavier, as if closeness itself was waking old fears neither of them could control. And while they still met often, sharing walks, meals, and quiet talks, something unseen had begun to shift inside Daniel after he received a call he did not expect, a call from Seattle, offering him a promotion and a return to the life he once believed was his future. And though the offer sounded impressive, it left him restless and torn, because the idea of leaving now felt like tearing something vital from his chest. He carried the weight of that choice silently, smiling when Eleanor spoke, listening when she laughed. But his thoughts often drifted elsewhere, and Eleanor noticed. Not because he changed his behavior sharply, but because she had learned to sense distance long before it was spoken, having lived through it once already. The warmth between them slowly filled with tension, not from conflict, but from uncertainty. And Eleanor's heart, which had begun to trust again, started to tighten with worry, reminding her of the pain she promised herself she would never repeat. Evenings that once felt light now felt careful, words chosen thoughtfully, pauses stretching longer. And though neither wanted to ruin what they had, silence began to say what they refused to voice. Finally, one evening, as the sun set low over the lake and painted the sky in deep orange and red, Eleanor stopped walking and asked the question that had been burning inside her. Her voice calm but fragile as she asked if Daniel was planning to leave, and the moment hung heavy between them as Daniel struggled to answer honestly without hurting her, knowing that avoiding the truth would only cause deeper pain. When he finally admitted that he did not know what he would do, that he felt pulled between the life he came from and the life he was building, Eleanor nodded quietly, but the words struck her deeply, reopening a wound she thought had healed. And in that moment, she felt the familiar fear of being someone's temporary comfort rather than their chosen future. They parted that evening without anger, but with hearts heavy and unsettled. And over the following days, they gave each other space, both believing distance might help them think clearly, though it only made the ache stronger. Eleanor returned to her routines, but the quiet that once protected her now felt empty, reminding her how much Daniel had come to matter. While Daniel wandered the town alone, realizing that the peace he searched for had quietly taken shape in the form of a woman who never asked him to be more than himself. Memories of his past failures haunted him, the engagement he walked away from, the habit of leaving when things grew complicated, and he began to question whether success meant anything if it cost him the chance at something real. Eleanor, meanwhile, wrestled with her pride and fear, telling herself she should step back before she was left behind again. Yet every memory of Daniel's kindness, his patience, and his honesty pulled her heart in the opposite direction. Neither slept well, neither felt whole, and both began to understand that what they shared was no longer casual or safe, but something meaningful and demanding. The tension reached its peak as Daniel's deadline to respond to the offer approached, and the weight of the decision pressed on him relentlessly. Because choosing Seattle felt like choosing comfort over courage, while staying felt like risking his heart completely, Eleanor sensed that time was running out. And one night, she stood by her window, watching the lights in his house, realizing that love was never meant to be easy or free of fear, and that protecting her heart had cost her years of quiet loneliness. Across the street, Daniel sat alone, surrounded by unopened boxes. The same boxes he never finished unpacking, because part of him always feared he would leave again. And it became clear to him then that the distance growing between them was not a sign they should walk away, but proof that what they felt was strong enough to matter. Part 3 of their story moved quickly toward its breaking point, filled with unspoken words, restless nights, and the painful understanding that when two guarded hearts finally open, the risk of loss becomes real, and the choice between safety and love can no longer be avoided. Daniel did not sleep the night before his decision was due, and as darkness slowly faded into early morning, he walked through the quiet streets of the town, moving fast as if staying still would make him lose courage. His thoughts sharp and clear for the first time in days, because he finally understood that every time his life reached a moment that mattered, he chose distance instead of depth, safety instead of truth, and now that habit stood before him again, asking to be followed or broken. He thought of Seattle, the tall buildings, the familiar pressure, the success that looked impressive but felt empty. And then he thought of Eleanor, her steady voice, her quiet strength, the way she listened without judgment, the way she made ordinary moments feel meaningful. And it became painfully clear that what he felt for her was not comfort or habit, but something alive, something growing, something he would regret losing long after any job title stopped mattering. The sun rose higher as he reached her house, and for a moment he hesitated, afraid that speaking would change everything. But he knocked anyway, knowing silence would hurt more. Eleanor opened the door slowly, surprise crossing her face before settling into calm, though her heart raced, and Daniel spoke quickly, honestly, without trying to sound perfect, telling her that he had been running his whole life, that he came to this town to hide, but instead found a reason to stay, telling her he did not want to choose fear again, that he wanted to choose her, not with promises he could not keep, but with effort, presence, and truth. Eleanor listened quietly, every word sinking deep, her emotions rising but controlled, because she had learned to protect herself. Yet something in his voice felt different, grounded, real, and she realized that love was never about certainty, but about choosing to stand still when leaving was easier. She told him she was afraid too, afraid of opening her heart only to lose it again, but also afraid of living a life where she never tried. And as she spoke, the wall she built around herself slowly fell, replaced by a steady warmth that felt like courage. They did not rush into celebration or dramatic gestures. They simply stood there, close enough to feel each other's presence, understanding that choosing each other was not a moment, but a direction. Days turned into weeks, and life moved forward quickly, filled with small but meaningful changes. Daniel declining the offer and committing to building something new where he was. Eleanor allowing herself to hope again without apology, and together they settled into a rhythm that felt honest, supporting each other through doubts and growth, learning that love was not constant excitement, but steady effort. They faced moments of fear, moments where old habits tried to return, but instead of pulling away, they talked, listened, stayed, and slowly trust replaced uncertainty. The town watched their connection grow naturally through shared mornings, quiet evenings, laughter that came easily, and comfort that deepened with time. And Eleanor often reflected on how close she came to closing her heart forever, while Daniel recognized that success meant nothing without someone to share the weight of it. Months later, standing by the lake as the water reflected the wide-open sky, Eleanor understood that love had not arrived loudly or dramatically, but steadily reshaping her life from the inside. And Daniel felt the same, knowing that what they built was not fragile, because it was chosen every day. What began as a simple glance had grown into something strong, not perfect, but real. Something greater than fear, mightier than past pain, and far beyond anything either of them ever imagined. And as they stood together looking toward a future still unwritten but no longer lonely, they understood that love, when chosen with courage, does not take away freedom. It gives it meaning,